Welcome back, everybody, to the Calaveria podcast, your one-stop shop for all things supernatural. I'm your host, Jose.
And I'm your host, Samantha.
And that's right, everybody. We are back with a brand new episode. And before we begin, Samantha, do you have any announcements?
None for me.
So I actually do have an announcement. So this episode is going to be coming out a little bit later than usual. And it's just been because, we've been having a lot of things going on. I have been, I know I mentioned it in the past in a couple episodes that I am looking forward to starting law school very soon, which is actually, I plan on going later this year. So because of that, I've been really focused on, the different events that have been coming up and seeing where exactly I'm going to end up at school. And then as for Samantha, we all know Samantha has been at school. So that's why we kind of have to schedule ahead and, all that good stuff. But nonetheless, we have this episode, but because we are putting this episode out later, we're not going to put out another episode the following week because this one should have came out last week. So I guess we're just going to get back on schedule with that. And again, just so you guys know, it won't be for another week. So, yeah. So before we get into our topic for today, I did want to talk about a few things. Have you been seeing all the things in the news past couple of weeks, probably about a month or so now, about all these UFOs that have been appearing and the Pentagon or not the Pentagon, but the Air Force have been chasing these spacecrafts and there's just so many videos everywhere. I see them all over TikTok, all over Twitter. You know what I'm talking about?
I have not seen any videos talking about spacecrafts in the air and Pentagon following them. What the hell?
Most people will know exactly what I'm talking about because I'm telling you, they've been everywhere, all over, just different places, We've had a lot of weird things happening, but the reason why I mentioned that is because I seen recently that the Pentagon reported that there is actually an alien mothership that's just, I guess, hovering over our atmosphere. I don't know exactly what they're planning to do, but the Pentagon just came out and just said that. What are we supposed to make of that?
So the Pentagon said that there's just a spaceship in our atmosphere. That's it.
Basically, like a mothership,
How do they know it's there? Did they get signals from it? What?
I mean, hey, we don't know what our government is capable of, so I don't know what technology they have. I don't know how they detected that, but that's what they came out and said. And I know a lot of people like to say that whenever major historical events are happening in real time, the government likes to distract us from certain things. And so a lot of people were saying that something is happening or something is going to happen and they want to distract us from what's really going on by having all this alien talk, because it's really weird how there's so many videos and just people reporting all this stuff and then out of nowhere.
And it feels kind of random, just last month you were saying what was so important of the aliens came that month or something.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. And the thing is, I don't understand why a lot of people make jokes about these alien encounters. What are aliens doing in rural Nebraska? Something like that. What are they doing here and why? Are they just coming down here just to mess with us? And why specifically the U.S.? I didn't really hear about this happening anywhere else other than here.
I always wondered that too. What are they doing with the crops? Why are there crop circles? Why are they messing with the corn?
Yeah, I don't know. Aliens are that's above me, honestly. I'm not built for that stuff. There was another thing I wanted to talk about, and it actually was recently I put out a TikTok about the Sally episode, right? So just kind of breaking down the basics of the story, and somebody commented on that TikTok something that I thought was very interesting. So this user, they commented on there, you know what? I would dream of this house growing up, and I just found out that it's the Sally house. Explain that to me.
That's crazy. What the heck? Imagine dreaming about a place and then learning it's an actual place, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's just so weird too. Like you said, we have no idea this person always dreamt of this their entire childhood or whatever it was, but to think that you went we for this purpose of this, right, we'll assume that you dreamt this at least more than 2 times, right? Because
Yeah.
if it's so like if it's stuck with you and it's so familiar, then chances are it's not the first time. But all this, and then randomly on TikTok, you just stumble upon somebody telling you about this house, and you just so happen to not scroll past it and watch it, and then they connect all those dots from like all your childhood years. Like that's just so random and like so coincidental.
It really is. Like, that's just crazy. Like, just being on TikTok and being like, what the? I've seen that house. Where have I seen it? And then immediately you're just like, I've dreamt of that house. And then imagine learning that it's like haunted by like supposedly a demon or something. Like, that's scary.
And that's one thing I wonder is that like, did this person live in the house while it was supposedly haunted? Like in their dreams, was the house haunted basically is what I'm asking, or was this just like their house? But then like when I was I was like commented back, right, and I asked them like, wait, so like you lived in the house in your dream? And they confirmed, they're like, yeah, like I remember the details. And I think that's just so weird how like you could make out the details of a house that I would assume this person has never been there. I don't know, I didn't ask them that, but I'm just gonna assume that, that's just like going to someone's house for the first time and then realizing like you know where everything's at already, like you've seen this before in a dream. That's just so weird. But okay, other than that, I don't think we have any more announcements or anything to address from the last episode. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. So for this episode, Samantha and I are going to be bringing you guys 2 new topics. And for mine, I'm actually going to be starting first because Samantha and I decided that mine is probably a little bit more heavier than hers. So we want to end off on a, basically like, on a light note. So because of that, I will be going first. And because of the nature of the topic that I'm going to be talking about, I do want to put out a trigger warning before we even start. So this is going to include discussions of suicide and animal abuse. So if for whatever reason you just are not able to listen to this, I completely understand. Maybe you want to skip ahead about 20 minutes or so to go on to Samantha's. But again, there will be discussions of suicide and animal abuse. If you feel like maybe you can try it out, and then if not, skip ahead, whatever works best for you guys. But with that being said, let's get into it. So the case that I have for us today is nothing like I've ever heard of before, and I'm sure it'll shock you all. We've spoken briefly in the past about people being consumed by a sort of negative energy that seems to manipulate their thoughts and urge them to act out of character. Think back to Tony Pickman in the Sally House. Well, this case deals with that same idea, but with a shocking twist. I'm talking about Overtoun Bridge. But before we talk about the bridge itself, we must first talk about the history of the land. In 1859, a wealthy industrialist and former lawyer by the name of James White purchased what was known as Overtoun Farm. Located near Dumbarton in West Dumbartonshire, Scotland, James White, now entering the family business of chemical manufacturing, wanted to build himself a mansion of sorts in order to have an escape from the bustling city of Glasgow. Given the location of Overtoun Farm, it was perfect. Soon White commissioned James Smith to build his ideal home. In 1864, construction was completed and Overtoun Farm became what we know it as today, Overtoun House. Just to give you some reference of how vast the land Overtoun House stood on, the whole estate was said to be 900 acres and would end up expanding to around 2,000 acres. For comparison, that's roughly the size of about 2,000 football fields. And construction of the home itself took around 1,000 men to complete. And with all that being said, the home was beautiful. But James White would not get to enjoy it for long, as in 1884, he would pass, leaving the home to his only son, John Campbell White, who in 1893 became Lord Overtoun. John Campbell White, or Lord Overtoun, lived at Overtoun House with his wife, Lady Overtoun. I will say, for some reason, most of my sources refer to her as Lady Overtoun, and none of them really name her for whatever reason. But according to the Wikipedia page on John White, her name is Grace Eliza McClure. Names aside, the two of them lived at the home. And as I mentioned earlier, Overtoun Estate was huge. So was the case that the eastern and western sides of the land were separated by Overtoun Burn, which is basically a small river. So it was then decided by John White that a bridge be made to connect the two sides together. Designer Henry Milner was tasked with the project, and in 1895, Lady Overtoun opened what is infamously known as Overtoun Bridge. Some years later, in 1908, John White died and was subsequently succeeded by his nephew, Dr. Douglas White. John's death would have a profound effect on his wife, Lady Overtoun, who was said to have mourned his death for many years thereafter up until her own death in 1931. Dr. White would eventually go on to give Overtoun House and its estate to the people of Dumbarton in 1939. Overtoun House would have many uses over the years. During World War II, it was used as a resting place for injured soldiers. And as a resting place, I do mean like a place to actually lay down and relax, not really, go
like
on
a
to the other
grave or
side.
anything.
Yeah, that's not what I mean. And in 1948, it was used as a maternity hospital, among other things. So, after hearing all that, one thing is clear. Overtoun House has an extensive history, and even then, I haven't even mentioned what some would say. Actually, scratch that. What most would say it is known for. That is, the estimated 300 to 600 dogs that since the 1950s have been throwing themselves off Overtoun Bridge.
What the hell?
Ultimately leading to the death of at least 50 of them, according to the New York Times.
How tall is this bridge again? Like, only 50 out of like the 300,000? That's crazy.
Not 1,000, 300.
300. Oh, I was like...
I mean, it's still a lot, you know?
Okay.
300 to 600. And it's like a 50-foot drop from all the research that I did. A lot of them were saying that, like, when the dogs jump, it is a 50-foot drop. And I know, like, you said 1,300. Honestly, it is a lot. It is just
that
a
is
lot.
a lot.
The reason why there's such a wide range between, like, it's literally a range of 300 more dogs, right? But it's because people don't know exactly why the dogs are doing this. So it's really hard to count. If you were to ask the locals, they are the ones that will mainly tell you that it's around 600 dogs. So really, this number is just very skewed. But as shocking as that may sound, it is completely true. For some unexplained reason, dogs have been jumping to their doom. Now, many consider it to be a sort of doggy suicide bridge. And look, I know that name is just very morbid, and honestly, I don't like it, but for the purposes, for the purpose of this episode, I will not be using that name anymore. The only reason why I added it here was because this is literally what a lot of locals nickname this, and this is what it's known as. But for the purpose of this episode, I will just be referring it as Overtoun Bridge. So this is extremely concerning, considering that Overtoun Bridge makes a great place to go for a walk. And you may be wondering what is compelling them to do so. Some even going back to try again after surviving the 50-foot drop. Many owners walking over the bridge have reported their furry companions becoming seemingly possessed by something before making them jump. In 2016, one such owner, Lottie McKinnon, was walking with her border collie named Bonnie over Overtoun Bridge when she says that she felt something was off about Bonnie. Something overcame Bonnie as soon as we approached the bridge. At first she froze, but then she became possessed by a strange energy and ran and jumped right off of the parapet. I was sure she was dead, Lottie explained. Luckily, Bonnie survived the jump off the bridge. Another dog owner in 2011 experienced a similar terrifying experience. Louise and David McPhail were walking over the bridge with their dog Sophie when suddenly Sophie just dove off of the bridge. It just happened so fast. Seconds, Louise said. There is a trend, however. Most, if not all, the dogs that have jumped have been long-nosed breeds. And just as puzzling, the dogs seem to be jumping from the same side, same spot, and all during clear, sunny days. But what exactly is making these dogs do this?
That's what I'm wondering. I'm like, okay, there's these specifics, like, why specifically these long-nosed dogs? Like, are they smelling something? Is it just this specific breed? Because, like, maybe there's, like, a demon or a spirit that wants this specific breed to jump off? Or, like, what's going on?
You see, we'll get into that, shortly, because there are different theories that people have, and it's actually been researched by actual researchers and scientists. But, everybody seems to have their own explanation as to exactly what's going on. But as you mentioned, right, with something as unexplained as hundreds of dogs willingly throwing themselves 50 feet below, people will begin to create their own theories. And so the current owner, Bob Hill, who has seen several dogs jumping off the bridge since his time at Overtoun House, chalks it up to smell. That is, the smell of small animals that run around the gorge. He says, quote, "The dogs catch the scent of mink, pine martens, or some other mammal, and then they will jump up on the wall of the bridge, and because it's tapered, they will just topple over." There are some that share Bob's explanation. In 2010, animal behavioralist Dr. David Sands set out to investigate what was really going on, and through his work, concluded that the dogs were not intentionally ending their own lives, which I'm glad he came out and specified this, because many people were thinking, as I mentioned, with the name and in the beginning, like, these dogs were thought to have been committing suicide. And it was shocking everybody, because some of these dogs were even trying to go again after, recovering from the first fall. Like, they just went right off again. So, like, it was shocking so many people. They didn't know why. And in it, he explains that, like, this is not something that animals do necessarily, right? They don't really have that urge the way that some humans do to, end their lives. So he had to come out and specify this, and I'm really glad he did, because many people were speculating that this was something, and it just is not the case, that animals don't really have that feeling like we do. Instead, Dr. Sand's work found that the scent of the animals below drew the dogs toward it. And according to the New York Times, Dr. Sands also believes that due to, quote, "the dog's limited perspective, their ignorance that the path changes from level ground to a bridge spanning a deep gorge, and the smells wafting through the air, probably enticed the dogs to jump." But even then, Dr. Sands could not deny the fact that the bridge emanated what he called a strange feeling.
You see, like, he gives the example, like, oh, it's because, like, the dogs, maybe they can't tell, so they jump off. But to me, like, that doesn't explain why dogs, after learning, like, dogs are smart, right? So I feel like after, like, learning, like, okay, this is a 50-foot drop, or, like, not even, like, they don't know it's that deep, but, like, they know how far it is, and they know how it hurt to fall down. Why are they going back? Like, what's drawing them to go back again? You would think once they hit the bottom, they'd go after the animals, but they don't. They come back around, and then they try to jump off again. That doesn't make sense to me.
Exactly. And this is just something that baffles, everybody, because he went out here. He was actually sent by the local council to go investigate and see what exactly is happening to these dogs, and why are these dogs doing this and so frequently. And it's not just, like we mentioned, there are some dogs that do it multiple times, but if we were to go there with our own dog, chances are the dog may do the same thing. Like, this is not just the same dogs over and over and over again. This is just something, for whatever reason, seems to happen, because I even mentioned, right, on the same spot, same place, same time of day. And it's just so weird. But he did try to, offer something, right? He says the smell of the animals. I think in his, like, research, what he did was, like, he got, like, the urine from one of these animals and sprayed it, and he found that, like, the dogs did react to this and they went crazy for it, right? But the one thing that I seen and I thought of as well was people talked about the fact that, like, okay, yeah, like, this may explain why maybe the dogs may react to it. They may want to go get the animals, and, like he says, their ignorance to the fact that, like, the bridge is not that, like, tall up, right? Because You think dogs, they're really low to the ground, and this bridge is pretty tall. The sides are pretty tall, so like a human can see that you're gonna go down to a drop, but a dog would not be able to see over that bridge and see that there is, nothing there for like another 50 feet. So he cites this stuff, right? But it doesn't make sense why this is only happening here. Because people like to say, well, okay, if that's the case, there are animals everywhere. This is not the only bridge in Scotland or the UK even that has animals nearby.
Exactly. I know, like, I don't know if it's just my brain thinking for like science, but I'm like, this can't be the only occurrence if that's like the true case. Like, animals are everywhere, smells everywhere that could draw the dog off of a bridge. Why is it like only here? Like, could you find any other places that this was happening at?
Yeah, and see, many people in like that I was like looking at like my sources, right? They also spoke about it. They tried to see if there was anything, and no, they couldn't find any other reports of this happening at any other bridge in any other part of the UK or the world. So it really just baffled everybody.
See, that's crazy. That makes me think like there's something else at play. It's not just these animals at the bottom of the bridge that's drawing these dogs in. It's definitely something else. There's another thing, smell, maybe. I don't want to like, since this is a paranormal podcast, I'm thinking maybe something even supernatural.
So you're mentioning all these things, right? One thing that I thought was interesting was, people basically, I guess I wouldn't say disproving this theory, because this is somewhat backed by science, right? They did research, and it wasn't just them saying like, oh yeah, it's this, and not doing anything about it, not running any tests. So one thing that people were talking about was, specifically with the animal wise, they always said that it was a mink, right? That for some reason the specific smell of mink, and I'm pretty sure which is why they chose to use like the urine from the mink, something about the mink made the dogs go crazy. But somebody pointed out, so this all began like around the 1950s, as I mentioned, right? Someone pointed out that there weren't even mink in the area around the time that this was happening, like as of recently. The mink is relatively new to the area, at least from one of my sources that I've seen. So if that's true, that is just very interesting, because they want to cite it to this one animal specifically, yet they may not even be native to the area and have just only recently popped up.
But that's not, like, it's not very recent that the dogs have been doing that, huh? It's been ever since,
it's like almost been 100 years. You think about it.
That is weird. You would think like, oh, if it's these animals that are causing these dogs to jump over, that like the researchers, they would choose that animals like specific pheromones, urine, anything like to try and attract those dogs to not to jump off, but like to see if the dogs go crazy just specifically for this animal. And they're kind of just shifting the blame on minks.
Yeah, so this is actually one of the most popular theories, but I did say this was one of the theories, right? And this leads me to the next theory. Despite how convincing the scent theory may be, many of the locals believe that there is actually nothing scientific about the happenings at Overtoun Bridge. Instead, they look to the paranormal, which is why we're talking about it, right? So, Dumbarton local Alistair Dutton says, people in Dumbarton are very superstitious. We grew up playing in the Overtoun grounds, and we believe in ghosts because we've all seen or felt spirits up here. Some have come to believe that the bridge and the land itself lies within what the Celts called a thin place, which is said to be a place where our world and the spiritual world connect. So what could be the cause, you may ask? Well, if you remember in the beginning of the story, I told you how Lady Overtoun grieved the death of her husband up until her own death. And it is said that she never truly left Overtoun House, and is now known as the White Lady of Overtoun. She has been spotted in and around the area, and she is known to walk around the property and has even been seen in windows. There is even a photo of the supposed White Lady in a window, but honestly, I couldn't see it myself, and I showed you the picture, Samantha, and
I couldn't really see it either. Like, the thing I'm guessing is her, to me, it kind of just looks like maybe like the light cutting through onto the window from like the shade of like branches. Like you'll see it like if you look it up. I don't know if we'll post it because like really we do honestly not see it at all.
Yeah, because of that, I don't see it. Samantha doesn't see it. it's not something that just kind of like pops out at you and you're like, what the heck is that? So for that reason, I won't be showing it. But if you just search up White Lady of Overtoun or Overtoun House Ghost, chances are you're going to see this picture. It's like one of the upper floors and it's just showing the window. And like Samantha mentioned, it kind of looks like it's like I guess it kind of messes with your brain because it does look like there is reflecting something off of like a tree or something, right? That's what you're kind of getting mixed with whatever could be inside. So yeah, I mean, it is one of the most famous pictures that people say about like the house that like as like an entity there, because I mean, I haven't really found anything else that showed the supposed White Lady. So as I mentioned, yeah, if you guys are interested, go look that up for yourselves. Let us know what you think. So with all that being said, how was this grieving spirit said to be responsible for the hundreds of dogs leaping off the bridge? Well, some claim that the White Lady's grief is so immense that it's actually being transferred to the dogs and making them want to end their own life.
See, like that kind of reminds me of how like people say dogs, like they don't feed off our energy, but they're very susceptible to how we feel and like our emotions, our anxieties, everything. Like they feel what we feel. Like they're very emotional creatures, you know? And that reminds me of like emotional support animals, how a lot of the time say like their owner has anxiety or depression. Those dogs, after time with like just being around the owners, end up developing that same like condition just in their own doggy form, I guess. And that, like, to me, like that could be like a pretty good explanation if like we are thinking in the paranormal sense and we're thinking of her grief and everything like that. Maybe those dogs are just feeling it and just having this overwhelming feeling like I can't deal with this no more. And yeah.
So I mean, this relates back to what I mentioned in the beginning about energy manipulating your thoughts or your actions, but in this case, it's manipulating animals. It is believed that the spirit of the White Lady is frequently seen by the pets, and as we know, like you mentioned, dogs, just like children, are more sensitive or keen to the supernatural. I really don't know what to make of this claim, but many of the locals seem to believe that this is the work of the White Lady. And what do you think?
I think it's a maybe. Like, I mean, if people were saying they've seen her on like throughout like the whole entire land, the locals know the land best. So if that's a running theory with them, I could see that being a big possibility.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of these people, like that first local that was mentioned, that a lot of them grew up here, obviously, and they played in the area. I would trust somebody who, you know, is from there more than somebody who just may be visiting and are looking for a scientific explanation, because we know people don't like to even consider the supernatural, the paranormal, at least in some cultures, right? And others, they do like to think of it as a possibility. But I will say, Scotland is known for like its weird and, you know, creepy paranormal, like ghoulish things, you know, that go on, because it is very old. And, you know, with that, there's so much history. And, you know, with that, like we know, comes paranormal, or at least spirits. So I think it's very interesting how not only the locals themselves, but many other people are embracing the fact that it could be something supernatural. And I mean, who is to say that it's not? Because even Dr. David Sands mentions that it's just like, you can't deny the fact that it has a weird, or like he calls it, right, strange feeling.
Like a strange energy, like just on the bridge, basically.
Exactly. And I can't just skim over the fact that the dogs are said to jump in the exact same place, like at the exact same time, for the majority of the time. Like, there just has to be some significance to that. There is just no point. I doubt the dogs can just feel that, like, oh, this other dog jumped right here, or, you know, I just don't know. I think that's something deeper to that. And I think it has to deal with also how I mentioned that the Celts had this idea of a thin place, which basically is like where our world meets the spiritual world. And many of the people believe that Overtoun House and just the land in general that it sits on happens to be one of these thin places. And now that I got your insight as to what you think it might be, I'll tell you what one proponent of this supernatural theory thinks. Paul Owens, a religion and philosophy teacher and paranormal enthusiast, told the New York Times, "After 11 years of research, I'm convinced it's a ghost that's behind all of this." You may be thinking, what research? Or who even is this guy? Well, I'll have you know that Mr. Owens actually has his own book on the unexplained phenomenon, and it's called The Baron of Rainbow Bridge, Overtoun's Death Leaping Dog Mystery Unraveled. And I'm not even kidding. You can get your own copy for £15, which is roughly $18 US. And one of my favorite things about all of this has to be the book cover. So Samantha, what do you think?
Who's that in the cape?
So I believe this is supposed to be, the Baron, right? Or like Lord Overtoun. I think that's who it's supposed to be. Because I searched up photos of Paul Owens, right? And that is not it. No, he's much younger. And he actually has hair.
I wonder if he made the book cover himself.
No, I'm pretty sure he made it himself. And if you guys are wondering what does this look like, I mean, you can search it up yourself, right? The Baron of Rainbow Bridge, or if anything, we're going to post it on our Instagram, so you guys can check that out. But man, this has to be my favorite part of this whole story because it's just, for one, it's just so creative. And he actually does use a picture of the bridge in there, which, I mean, like, how could you not, right?
Yeah.
And so, like Samantha said, who is that person, right? Is that him? You guys are going to know exactly what she's talking about because there's, like, this guy just wearing, like, a big, like, Abe Lincoln, like, magician's hat with a little cape, like, a real cheap cape. And, yeah, I'm assuming this is supposed to be Lord Overtoun. And then, of course, right, we wouldn't be talking about the dog leaping bridge if we didn't have dogs leaping off the bridge.
Yeah. And rainbow.
Yeah, and like the name says, Rainbow Bridge. He likes to throw on some rainbows on there. But I will say, his meaning behind all this and for the book cover, it actually makes a lot of sense once you look into what is the book about and what does he talk about in the book. If you're wondering what the book might have in store, let me just read to you what it says on Paul's website. Overtoun Bridge at Dumbarton, Scotland, is the haunt of the world's greatest dog leaping mystery. With over 100 dogs leaping from the walls and parapets of this ancient bridge, what might lie behind the terrifying canine phenomenon? Have teams of animal experts, scientists, ghost hunters, psychics, and dowsers solved the riddle? Did the bridge's wealthy builder, Baron Overtoun, hold the key to unlocking this mystery? Or is it the ghost of his wife, Lady Overtoun, who is responsible for spooking the dogs on the bridge? Author Paul Owens has 4 decades of personal experience with Overtoun and uncovers its dark, supernatural past. With ghosts, presences, shadows, spirits, and strange energies all being experienced around the bridge, might the paranormal offer a clue in solving the canine mystery? And I mean, I gotta say, he really knows how to tie you in. Like, reading all this and just the cover itself, it really makes me want this book. But all jokes aside, Paul does offer some interesting insight about the bridge and it being a part of the thin place that I mentioned earlier. On his site, he talks about the Rainbow Bridge from Norse mythology, which, as the name suggests, is a bridge that is said to connect our world to the world of the gods. And for you Marvel fans out there, this bridge has been depicted numerous times in the Thor movies. So this is like what Thor uses to actually come into like our world. And it's just a clear depiction. That's just one thing I adore about Marvel, right? Is they know how to incorporate the Norse mythology to like movies, right? And you don't really think about it because when I was looking into this, I was just like, it instantly when he said Rainbow Bridge, I thought of like Marvel and Thor. And there's a good reason for that. Paul also mentions a famous poem called Rainbow Bridge that depicts a bridge that dogs use to cross over to the afterlife. And according to Paul, Overtoun Bridge is a real-life rainbow bridge. Clearly, he knows his stuff. 11 years of research is no joke. But you see there, like, that is that is just something, like, as funny as it may seem when the cover and everything, I actually searched up that poem, and it really is something that, not necessarily, I don't know if it's specifically for dogs, but many people do use it for dogs, right? But it's more for, like, animals, kind of showing that, like, they are going into, like, a happier place, right? So, like, the idea of, like, all dogs go to heaven.
Do you have that poem with us right now, or?
Yeah, so I'll read that for you right now. And this one does, like I mentioned, like, it's not necessarily for dogs, but people like to, insert whatever animal it is that they're talking about into this. Just this side of heaven is a place called Rainbow Bridge. When a dog dies that has been especially close to someone here, that dog goes to Rainbow Bridge. There are meadows and hills for all of our special friends so they could run and play together. There's plenty of food, water, and sunshine, and our friends are warm and comfortable. All the dogs who had been ill and old are restored to health and vigor. Those who were hurt or maimed are made whole and strong again, just as we remember them in our dreams of the days and times gone by. The dogs are happy and content, except for one small thing. They each miss someone very special to them, who had to be left behind. They all run and play together, but the day comes when one suddenly stops and looks in the distance. His bright eyes are intent. His eager body quivers. Suddenly, he begins to run from the group, flying over the green grass, his legs carrying him faster and faster. You have been spotted, and when you and your beloved dog finally meet, you cling together in joyous reunion, never to be parted again. The happy kisses rain upon your face, hands again caress his beloved head, and you look once more into the trusting eyes of your dog, so long gone from your life, but never absent from your heart. Then the two of you cross Rainbow Bridge together.
That's a really nice poem. I like that one.
Yeah, so as you can see here, there is a clear connection with that poem, which it is a very famous poem. And clearly, this really does kind of, I wouldn't say resemble Overtoun Bridge, but it does have these similarities with this being a, like Paul says, like a literal rainbow bridge. Like the dogs are seemingly using this to cross over to the other side because, that's, some of them have died. And it is very strange. It just all goes back to everything we talked about with this being the only bridge where this happens. And why is it that they jump from the same exact spot and it's only there and they just continue to do it even after? It is just
too many coincidences for it to be just a normal occurrence that can be explained by science.
Exactly. Like, I don't know, like certain things aren't meant to be explained by, science and all this. At least I feel certain things do have, a supernatural aspect to them, right? Because I just like to believe that there is more to this world. I mean, in the beginning of this episode, we talked about this mothership and all this. Like, if we believe all this stuff is true, why would there not be things in our own world, right? We cannot be, for one, the only living things in the entire universe. Who's to say there isn't a such thing as a thin place? As sad as this is for these animals to be seemingly, ending their own lives, there has to be something that, like, I think what Paul offers is, something to, I guess, lighten up the mood for the whole thing, right? Where these animals are going to be in a better place if they do, end up succumbing to their injuries. And just when you think we might be done, Overtoun Bridge has more. And if you stuck with us this far, and for those of you that may have skipped ahead and landed on this part, I do want to give another trigger warning. We are going to be talking about self-harm and the death of a child, and more specifically, the murder of a child. So with that being said, I mean, if you don't want to listen to this, I will say that this is the last part. Probably skip ahead 10 minutes or so. Okay, so now that I got that out of the way, I'm going to begin. In October of 1994, a 32-year-old man by the name of Kevin Moy was walking along the bridge with his wife and 2-week-old baby boy. And reports say that they were, against the bridge, right? They stopped along the bridge maybe to just look out into the scenery. And that's when Kevin Moy suddenly dropped his baby boy over the bridge. And shortly after, he tried jumping off the bridge himself, seemingly to end his own life. But he was frantically stopped by his wife, who was horrified, and rightfully so, at what she just witnessed. The newborn was fatally injured and would succumb to their injuries the very next day. The baby boy's name was Okan. Following the incident, Moy was taken to Overtoun House, where he grabbed a knife and tried to end his life once again by slashing his wrist, before he was ultimately arrested. It was later revealed that Moy believed he was the Antichrist and his baby boy was Satan. Moy claimed that the birthmark on his baby's head was put there by the devil himself. He also believed that he and his child were solely to blame for the Gulf War, and also worried that the both of them would be responsible for the end of the world through a virus that would infect all of mankind. Moy was ultimately found not guilty by reason of insanity and was sent to a state hospital in Carstairs, Scotland. It is clear that Moy was suffering from some sort of mental illness, but yet some attribute the horrific incident as being further proof of the bridge's haunting. And honestly, I don't know what to make of that. I am not going to choose a side, and I do say that he did have some sort of mental illness, like he clearly wanted to end his own life because he was trying to make the jump himself, and then, to slash his own wrists in the house itself with other people because they rushed him inside. I don't know if where I got it from, they didn't really specify if it was like to make sure he was okay or if they took him there to be like, what the hell did you just do? But they took him in the house and he just quickly grabbed a knife and tried to, kill himself that way. So I just clearly think that there's something wrong with him. And I mean, I wasn't able to find anything else like to update us on whether he's still there or what the case is.
Yeah, from what it sounds like, definitely, like, I had some, like, mental health issues going on that led him to have, like, this psychosis where he believed him and his son were gonna end the world somehow. I don't know. I wouldn't want to pin it on anything paranormal because, to me, like, obviously this is some serious stuff and we don't really know what led him to do this. And,
this, to just say, like, oh, yeah, it's the spirit, I don't know. I feel like it's disrespectful to, the woman who lost her child and the child themselves, just to say, like, oh, yeah, let's just play on, like, the spooky lore. Like, nah, this was more to it because this was honestly one of the, I want to say it was the only case of, like, a human doing something or attempting to end their lives, like, on the bridge. It's mainly just been dogs, which is why it was so, the case itself is just so interesting to many people, and it is very unexplained. So to attribute this action by a human being to the spirit, I don't think that's the case. Clearly this man was going through something, and I mean, we can only hope that he has gotten better, and if not, that he is getting the treatment that he needs. And yeah, I don't really want to speak on that too much anymore, but with all that, I'll leave it up to you. What do you think is going on at Overtoun Bridge?
I don't know. Something weird.
Yeah. Well, I'll end off by thanking my sources, and I have to say I do have quite a bit of sources for this one. Thank you to the New York Times for their article, Dog Suicide Bridge, Why Do So Many Pets Keep Leaping into a Scottish Gorge? Written by Ceylan Yinginsu on March 29th, 2019. Thank you to allthat'sinteresting.com for their article, Inside the Mystery of Overtoun Bridge, Scotland's Dog Suicide Hotspot, written by Natasha Ishak on March 28th, 2019, and updated on August 15th, 2019. Thank you to overtownhouse.org for the information of the land's early history. Thank you to littlehouseofhorrors.com for their post on Overtoun Bridge, written by the site owner, Sonia, on an unknown date. Thank you to thecut.com for their article, I'm Sorry, But This Bridge is Clearly Haunted, written by Amanda Arnold on March 27th, 2019. Thank you to slate.com for the article, The Dog Suicide Bridge of Dumbartonshire, written by Ella Morden on November 5th, 2014. Thank you to paulowens.org for the information on his book and the information on Rainbow Bridge. And finally, thank you to heraldscotland.com for their article, Father Who Threw Devil Baby from the Bridge Sent to Carstairs, written by an unknown author on January 31st, 1995. And I do have to say, I think I agree with that title of the cut one, right? So they say, I'm sorry, but this bridge is clearly haunted.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, there's definitely something there.
Now onto my case. This is going to be a lot more lighthearted than your story, for sure. But okay. We've talked about haunted houses, hospitals, and even haunted bathrooms before on this podcast. But we haven't talked about a haunted restaurant before. La Golondrina is one of the oldest Mexican restaurants in Los Angeles. It first opened back in April 19, 1930, by its founder, Consuelo Castillo de Bonzo. Now, this is obviously a very old restaurant. It's almost been open for like nearly 100 years, right?
Yeah.
So I won't keep it a surprise when I tell you that this place is said to be one of the most haunted restaurants in California. You know, due to all its history, obviously, where you're going to suspect there's probably some hauntings going around.
Yeah, and actually, it is over 100 years old.
Oh,
You said
yeah.
1903, right?
1930.
Oh, 1930. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, never mind. We're getting there. 7 more years.
So let me just tell you a little bit about the building. It's a 3-story building and it was built back in the 1850s. So this building is older than the actual restaurant, right? And before it was a restaurant, the building was actually used as a brothel. So it has that history. You could only suspect what happened then.
Right.
But let me tell you some history on its founder. Consuelo Castillo de Bonzo was brought to America as a baby by her mother. She grew up loving her culture, so when she was an adult, she wanted to spread her culture back to Los Angeles, which at the time was very whitewashed, she believed. You know, a lot of people that were living there weren't accepting of her culture. People at the time were, instead of saying Mexican, they would say Spanish to get like better people, like possibly like more people to come in to their place. Or
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that whole history. Oh man. Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
If you guys aren't from California, I mean, if you are from California, you obviously will learn some of this history. But for those of you that aren't from California, California used to be Mexican territory. Before then, obviously, the Spanish were here, which is why we have a lot of missions, and these are all like Spanish missions. So there's a lot of like history of Mexican prejudice here, especially because the indigenous people here were obviously, like I said, indigenous, and then it became a Mexican territory, and then obviously that was taken by the U.S., and ever since there has been a lot of tension. I mean, some may even say even to this day.
So yeah. So when she opened her first Mexican restaurant back in 1924, it was at a time where people like, even in her family and like around her, they were judging her like, why would you call it a Mexican restaurant? Why are you advertising that you're serving Mexican food? You should say instead like a Spanish restaurant. And like, how do you feel about that? Like, obviously,
Honestly, this just makes me mad. Like, I know these are different times where people, they were trying to fit in. They didn't want to have sort of like a target on their back in a sense. And I completely understand that. But like, you know, I feel like nowadays we are privileged in the sense that we are, I wouldn't say things are more accepting. I mean, yeah, I would say things are more accepting. I mean, it's just being accepting of who you are, like literally. And it's so sad to say that it's like, you know, we're more accepting now when it should literally just be the bare minimum standard, right? But yeah, it just rubs me the wrong way.
Luckily, the Bonzo, she did not care.
Okay,
She just went right ahead and moved past everyone that was telling her, giving this advice. And she put a big banner outside her restaurant with Mexican cooking, advertising this food.
Love it.
Even the health department, though, like, they did not believe in her dream. No one really believed in her dream.
Well,
other
yeah,
than
I
herself.
doubt it. Obviously, you know, people were gonna look down on us.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, the health department, since they didn't really think she was gonna have a restaurant for a long time, they didn't give her a license. They just gave her a temporary permit for just the amount of time that they think she was gonna be there, I guess.
They literally preyed on her downfall.
Literally. And so this was like the first restaurant in LA to ever be like labeled as a Mexican restaurant. I'm not sure if it was like in all of California, but I'm assuming it's definitely one of the first, you know. And she would have to close this restaurant, sadly, since it was in the construction of like the LA City Hall where like it was gonna be, and so she would have to close it so that they could like do construction and everything like that. But she did open another one, and that is not the restaurant we're talking about today. But let me get into the history of La Golondrina, though.
Okay.
So the story of La Golondrina starts with someone named Christine Sterling starting a project to turn this street in LA where the original pueblo was, called Calaveria Street, into an era filled with romanticized living history replica of the pre-US Los Angeles. Those were the exact words that the person said, I guess. I don't know.
Mexican LA.
Yeah, I'm guessing, just Mexican LA.
Basically, right.
And so Sterling asked the Bonzo, hey, would you like to open up a cafe in this area? And, well, the Bonzo kind of thought she was a little, Sterling was a little crazy and, very ambitious. She loved sharing her culture. She believed in this dream. She didn't care if, this was kind of, a crazy project, for this person to do.
She just wanted to get it out there.
Mm-hmm. And so she gladly was a part of it. And she was giving this 3-story building that many called the Palachoni House. And she opened her 3rd ever Mexican restaurant, called La Golondrina Cafe. Just like her past 2, it was a major success. And, these were huge successes. Even her 2nd restaurant, I couldn't remember the name of it, but a lot of elites would go. It wasn't just people in the area. A lot of elites were going. This was just food she was cooking herself in the kitchen, and people loved it. People, they weren't caring it's Mexican food. They weren't holding any prejudice. They saw this place as a place to get some bomb ass food. So they were going.
That makes me happy, but then at the same time, it's one of those things that, we say they don't love us, but they sure love our food.
Yeah. That's one other thing where it kind of rubbed me the wrong way when I learned that when they had first opened the restaurant, they didn't have a public opening for the first I guess day that they had it all established. They just allowed a lot of elites that Sterling knew come see the place, I guess. And I can't remember the exact Mexican there was a Mexican star that would often go to her other restaurant. She was also invited, and maybe just a few other very well-known Mexican stars were also invited. But it was just a lot of elites that sponsored the area. So project.
It seemed like her partner Sterling was, I guess, trying to get the restaurant off on a good start, basically.
Yeah,
right? Okay,
basically.
That's nice of her.
Mm-hmm. So reading on this, I was very proud of Bonzo, for sticking with her culture and just being I don't like you guys, or not that I don't like you guys, but I'm not gonna listen to you guys.
Right.
I'm gonna do whatever I think is best. I'm opening this restaurant, and I don't care.
Yeah, see, I'm so surprised that I never heard of the restaurant, but I mean, let alone her opening the first Mexican restaurant in LA, which is synonymous for Mexican food everywhere,
Exactly. Me too. That's why I was very interested in learning the history behind this place, and I was surprised that just how old it was as well, and that it was haunted. I was just this is a cool place.
Yeah.
And sadly, I will like to say I'm pretty sure it's closed. Cause
man, I was just about to ask you.
I'll talk about the Yelp reviews later, because I did look at the Yelp reviews. But on Yelp, it says a lot of people are saying that it's closed, it's not open no more. So I don't know if I'm thinking it probably closed, because when I looked at their Instagram last time they updated, they did talk about getting support for their workers during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Man, see, that's what I was.
So I'm thinking maybe it was the pandemic and everything like that.
I was hoping you wouldn't say that.
Yeah, guys, I'm sorry. I don't think we could visit it anytime soon. But let me continue on. So this isn't an interview with the original owner, but it's the 3rd generation owner, Vivian Bonzo. And so she got interviewed by the LA Times, and they asked her about this place because they were getting a lot of reports saying this place is haunted. And so they asked her, is this place haunted? And she goes, this place is definitely haunted. But not just this place, all of Calaveria Street, where the restaurant was located, and where this project by Sterling was held and everything like that. And she talks about how the Villa Adobe nearby is said to be haunted by some ghost in white clothing. And immediately I think of those classic stories of the woman in white.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people say when you walk by that place, you can see a ghost at night, just standing there in white clothing, roaming the grounds or whatever. And Vivian also talked about how some of the merchants on the street had fallen victim to witches' spells. and how one woman even sucked out a curandera to help her lift the spell that she had on her that was just affecting her life so much. And she did like the eggs cleansing thing, and when she cracked the egg, there was blood and black in the egg. So I'm like,
yeah. See, for those of you that don't know what Samantha was talking about, it's something that, like, for one, I mean, I know it's in Mexican culture. I don't know if any other Latin American culture. I'm pretty sure there are others that do this. It's a sort of cleansing. I mean, you may have seen something similar like on TikTok. People do this. I wouldn't even call it a ritual, but it's more of, it's literally what it is, like cleansing, right? It's to cleanse all that negative energy from you.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, this lady got this done, like, you know, professionally, and I mean, the curse was lifted. She said that, like, she was perfectly fine, nothing was happening, and she said that she was pretty sure it was one of the merchants that had black candles in their window.
Oh no!
Yeah, I was just like,
there's some brujeria going on.
From this interview with Vivian Bonzo from the LA Times, I was just like, it's not only this restaurant that has all this history and all this paranormal stuff that's happening. It's the whole area.
Yeah, I think that adds to the, like, I guess the spooky factor, right? Like, it's just crazy. It'd be one thing if it was just a restaurant, but to have everything around it?
Exactly.
No.
Like, that's crazy. So my next source that I have is actually a Vice article. And we like watching, you know, Vice's content on YouTube and also like just their media in general. And so this article, it's an article on not just like the haunting of like La Golondrina Cafe, but also like them doing a ghost hunting themselves.
That's cool. That is really cool.
You know, that's what I find really cool about Vice. Like, they kind of go above and beyond, I feel like, at times. And so they talk about how the cafe was allegedly haunted by many different spirits, but one of the most well-known one is La Consuela, a ghost that is often seen hanging around the stairs that overlook the Oliveira Street. And so they also interviewed Vivian Bonzo at the time, who was still the owner, and she tells the author, Javier Cabral, that ever since the restaurant originally opened, many employees have complained about many supernatural occurrences. Vivian tells Vice that, "My dad, who was a very macho manly man, used to live in the restaurant for years and would purposely leave the door in his room open, just in case he had to run out if he got too scared."
Oh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah. To me, I thought that was really funny that he kept his door open just in case he was like, oh,
I
gotta get out.
Tough, I'll stay here, but hey, if it gets too crazy, I'm leaving.
Exactly. She even tells them how they've caught a bottle flying across the room on cameras one night when no one was there to have thrown it. On other times, an employee who was the last one left in the restaurant had a nail thrown at her and actually hit her in the arm.
Oh, wow.
But again, like I said, no one was in the restaurant. She was the last one there. So
that's just creepy.
They've caught a bottle flying on the security cameras when no one's in the restaurant. That's already creepy. And then this other girl's getting nails thrown at her. Like,
yeah, you imagine if it was like with enough power, obviously that could have done some real damage.
It could have. Vivian says she has grown to accept the spirit's place in the restaurant, especially La Consola, who she's seen countless times gliding down the stairs she is regularly seen on. So I found that interesting that she emphasizes gliding down because, you know, like ghosts.
Yeah, they don't really walk.
Yeah. And so I was just like, oh, that's creepy. Just imagining seeing this like lady just coming down the stairs and she has no legs. She's just gliding down. Like, ugh.
You see, like, this seems like it could be like a sitcom or something, right?
Yeah.
Like just running a restaurant with ghosts in it. Like, that's cool.
It could really definitely be. I'm thinking of like the show, like What We Do in the Shadows, kind of like something spooky like that, you know? And like I said earlier, Vice is crazy because they don't just stop at getting the information, you know, they don't stop at just interviewing Vivian Bonzo or anything like that. They actually decide to go and investigate and do ghost hunting themselves. So Javier, he invites this crew of people. Specifically, he invites this person, Victor Huesca, who is a paranormal researcher who's written a book called Haunted East Los Angeles. And he invites him, obviously, to aid him in ghost hunting. This guy, he's a professional. He says he's a professional paranormal researcher. He has all this equipment. And so they go. And they're there at La Golondrina at 10 p.m. And at this time, you know, like the restaurant is closed, but like a lot of the workers are still there, like closing, putting away things and getting ready to leave, basically. And so they interview some of the employees who are getting ready to finally just get out of that place. And they ask them, have you ever experienced any supernatural occurrences while working? The worker tells them that there definitely are some entities that roam La Golondrina, and that most workers are still terrified anytime they have an occurrence with one. But this worker that said that did tell them that, like, I created a prayer whenever something happens, like a specific prayer for when this happens. So I'm like, this must be a very regular occurrence, because he says that he'll do it anytime, and like usually he's fine, but he's like, everyone else though, they're still scared, but I have my prayer. He's like, I'm safe.
He found the cheat code.
He found his cheat code. And obviously they didn't just stop there. They asked another employee, who tells them that they've had trouble finding a repairman since the last one doesn't want to return after his tools kept turning on and off while he was working. That's scary. Imagine pulling up thinking you're just gonna be working at this like old restaurant, and then like your power tools just start turning on and off. Like, nah, I wouldn't want to return.
Yeah, that is scary.
Javier and his group don't start their investigation until it hits 12 a.m. So they're staying in there for a pretty long time.
They're doing this on purpose.
For 3 hours, nothing happens though. And Victor begins to talk about how spirits can be less active when there's lots of people around in one area. So I'm guessing, you know, they probably were like investigating like a big group going room to room.
Right.
Nothing's really happening. But as soon as he says this, as he finishes his sentence, they hear a loud thud come from somewhere in the restaurant.
And they letting it be known.
I know. I'm like, they immediately are like, what the hell is that? And they go searching and they check every room to see like, oh, what fell over? What was this thud? The restaurant's fine. Nothing fell over. Nothing broke or like just nothing. The restaurant is fine. They don't know what the source of the sound was. This was just the beginning of the paranormal activity though. But I guess since like a lot of the stuff, the equipment they were trying weren't really working, they kind of decided to go with the classic Ouija board.
Oh my god, that is no. If
you've heard us before talk on this podcast, you know we don't think using an Ouija board is smart. So
yeah, see, we love all things paranormal, but we don't mess with all things paranormal.
I'm guessing since, you know, Victor, like he's like a paranormal professional, I'd feel like maybe like they're in a big group, like they should be fine, I guess.
Yeah.
But even then, I wouldn't want to use one personally. And so, you know, they pull out the old reliable Ouija board and they decided to ask questions. So one of the members in their group, who goes by Hadley, asked the basic first question. Is somebody here with us right now? The piece then begins to move. And the whole group is spooked out and they're asking, are you moving it? Are you moving it? And everyone goes, I'm not moving it. I'm not moving it. And while the whole group is spooked out, it slowly heads to the letter H and to J before stopping immediately after. And the group kind of just takes that as like cue, like, okay, we're done. We don't know what H and J means, but like, we're done. We got to get out of here, you know? And that's kind of just it for them. Like, they don't get anything else. They've just got stories from like the employees. They interviewed Vivian, and that's it. They heard that loud thud. They felt the ambiance in the room. They were like, this is weird. And they got an H and a J. But like J and H, like, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
So,
I mean, those are my initials.
Hey, maybe.
This is a sign.
But so at the end, Javier, he ends his article by saying like, the next day, like they were all thinking about this experience, obviously. And one of his friends in the group texted him, hey, Hadley was the one that asks the question. And you were the main one, like, talking to the ghost or, like, talking with Victor.
Javier and Hadley. Oh, my Lord.
That's what they were saying. And I was just like, maybe. And I was just like, that's weird. But, yeah. So, that's essentially what most of the stuff that I have on Golondrina. What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? Would you want to visit this restaurant?
Honestly, I would, because... For one, it's in a restaurant, right? So you're not really thinking like, oh, I'm going to be there by myself late at night or whatever. Like, you couldn't go there to eat during the day or whatever the case may be. And who knows, you may feel something. You may see something. I mean, you mentioned that mainly it's the workers. Do you know if like actual people eating there have experienced anything or have seen anything?
See, I tried looking through the Yelp reviews on this to see if anyone talks about it. And no one really talks about it. They just talk about like, oh, the tortillas are good, like, oh,
yeah,
they just talk about the food, obviously, you know, it's Yelp reviews.
See, I would visit it then, you know. It might be one of those things where like okay, so obviously it's a restaurant. You're gonna go to eat whatever, right? It could be one of those things where it's only messing or showing itself to the restaurant staff because they're there all the time, and the spirit is obviously there all the time. Whereas, you know, an everyday person just going in to eat, they may or may not show themselves to them because, in all honesty, I mean, we don't really know how spirits work. Like, they do whatever they want. But I think I would. And I honestly would want to, like, go and, like, I guess sort of do some sort of, like, investigation like that. Because it's just like, when do you hear about a haunted Mexican restaurant?
Exactly. And, like, when they were doing their investigation, Javier says that, like, Victor uses, like, kind of like a spirit box, but, like, more professional. Like, I can't remember the name, like, a specific one that it'll actually just spit out the words, but it doesn't make, like, the noise very much, you know? If you guys don't know what a spirit box is, basically it's like this you could think of it as a radio because it shifts through, like, the different radio stations. Like,
it basically allows spirits to communicate with us using
like the staticky noise, like, in, like, the radio waves, basically. And so, like, say, like, a ghost speaks into it saying, like, hello, you would hear, like, hello, like, like a
some
weird voice.
Sort of variation of that using the frequencies. I know it sounds really odd if you don't know what we're talking about. I mean, just try searching that up, right? A spirit box. I'm pretty sure you'll find out really quick what we're talking about.
So they tried using that, but, like, nothing was really coming out, like, at all. Like, no one was talking, and so that's why Victor was just like, he says at the end, like, when Javier asked him, like, well, why didn't we get, like, a lot of like interactions or anything like that when these workers are saying, like, oh, almost every day, or, like, whatever, like, what happened? And Victor says, like, well, since we are in a big group and, like, they don't know us, they probably we're frightened. Like, they've never had an investigation there before, I guess. That's what Victor says. And so, I mean, like, they were the first ones, I'm guessing, that investigated it at all.
Yeah.
Like, beforehand, it was just the people that owned it.
It was just, like, a hearsay type of thing. Yeah. Like, oh, hey, this place is haunted.
And so he was saying, like, maybe we just frightened them. Like, they've never had someone come in here and be like, hey, talk into this and we'll be able to hear you. Like, sure, they communicated possibly with people, but they've never been directly communicated by someone, you know? And so I think that could be a thing. Like, I don't know how ghosts work. You know, we both said this. So maybe it just was very off for them or whatever. But I would want to go, not just because, like, it's a haunted restaurant or anything like that, but also because, like, the history behind it. It's, like, one of the first few, like, Mexican restaurants, the oldest Mexican restaurant in LA. It
is American history, and I mean, it is Mexican history as well.
And Javier did say that their flour tortillas are bomb as hell. And I'm like, I want to go. And a lot of people did say the food is really good. But I guess when they were open, I did see people on Yelp complain about the wait. But I'm like, hey, if the wait is long, it means the food is bomb.
Yeah, that is a valid point right there. So, I mean, hey, if whatever reason, hopefully, you know, this is like, you mentioned that they were closed. Hopefully it's one of those things where they're temporarily closed or something, you know. There's just, obviously this is something that means a lot to people, and hopefully they can bring this back. And I would hope to, you know, visit there one day.
Me too. If they open up, I hope we can go, you know? Like, we're in the area.
Yeah, for sure. This is one of those things where, like, this is one of the few times that we actually will go visit a haunted place.
When it's a restaurant.
Yeah. But no, I really enjoyed that story. It was a lot more lighthearted for sure.
Definitely. When you were explaining yours, I was just like, okay.
Yeah, no, it is definitely a heavier one, but it is one of the crazier ones that I've ever heard of. I've never heard of anything like that.
Me either. Like, that was the first time. And so when you told me, like, no other places, like, had anything like that, and they were trying to scientifically explain it, I'm like, if it's science, I feel like it could be repeated again. Like, it has to be able to happen somewhere else, not just in this one location in the world.
Right.
And so, yeah, very interesting cases we had here today, guys. I would like to thank my sources. Thank you to Los Angeles Times for Long Before It Became La Golondrina Restaurant by Steve Harvey, LA Weekly for A Slice of Mexican American History, The Origins of Olivera Street's Oldest Restaurant by Hadley Mares, and Vice's I Went Ghost Hunting in One of LA's Oldest Mexican Restaurants by Javier Cabral, and Food Network's The 50 Most Haunted Restaurants in America by Layla Croy Hanold.
Ooh, that last source, that sounds like something we might have to use in a future episodes.
Definitely, yes. I saved that one for us.
All right, so I mean, great. I believe, we had some great cases for you guys, Samantha. That was a great story. And as always, you guys, you already know we got something to talk about. And for this one, we have a TikTok. This is not necessarily one of, like, I guess the usual TikToks where it's capturing something on camera, but more of a story that somebody told. So this person, the user goes by Kingsbridge_Rich, stitched somebody that was talking about a incident that happened where some students were using a Ouija board. And he goes on to talk about his experience with the Ouija board in the Bronx. For those of you that don't know, the Bronx is one of the 5 boroughs that make up New York City. Well, anyways, he goes on to talk about that this was something that happened back in the 90s. And he said that there was a friend of his that it was his house or his apartment was just the place to be at, right? I feel like everybody has that one friend that, like, you would all just hang out at their house. And this was that friend. So he goes on to say that they're chilling at their house, and I don't know what happens, but they decide to start playing with the Ouija board. And like we mentioned literally not too long ago, we don't mess with Ouija boards. I never have. I don't think I ever will.
I won't ever in my life.
Yeah. And I mean, this story it kind of shows why. So he says that, they're on the Ouija board, that they actually talked to a couple of spirits. And then suddenly this one spirit comes out, says that their name is Frank. He goes on to say that, like, Frank tells them, I guess, that he was murdered back in the day in the Bronx. And he even goes on to give them, like, details about, like, the area and specific phone numbers. And he says that Frank tells him if he can call his family, right? And not only that, but Frank takes it up a notch. So according to this user, this poster, he starts showing his spirit powers, right? So what would happen is, given the fact that this was, the hangout spot for everybody, he said that whenever there would be somebody approaching the room or knock on the door, the spirit, Frank, would immediately just start spelling out the people's names. So if you were to come in this room right now or come walking over here, it's going to spell out Samantha. And then you'd walk in. And so it did this a couple times, and they were just like, okay, whoa, Frank, chill out.
Yeah.
Like, we get it.
We get it. We understand now.
And then he says that there's this one, it starts spelling out this name, the specific name. And then the person that walks in doesn't go by that name, right?
Okay.
And so they're like, oh, like, you got it wrong, kind of making fun. And then the friend whose house it was, right? He just stares at them, like, in shock. And they're looking at him like, what's wrong? Well, what these people didn't know was that this guy was actually one of his close friends, because they, were there from the same neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And they actually knew him by a nickname. And the name that Frank spelled out was his actual name.
Oh my god.
So they didn't know. They didn't know what his actual name was. They just referenced him by his nickname. And so when this happened, they were, like, just in shock, and they thought, oh, Frank, yeah, you got it wrong. Where the one person and the whole friend group knew that this was actually his
person's, like,
name.
true name. Oh my god.
And so it gets even crazier, right? At this point, they're like, okay, we're done. Like, they stopped playing with it. So he goes on to say that sometime later, stuff just starts happening to the people in the neighborhood. And according to him, he said this is like newspaper worthy stuff. So you can only imagine. And he's not saying good stuff, right? We're not talking about people hitting the lottery. Mm-hmm. He's saying, like, some bad stuff was going down. I mean, you can only imagine. So he says that one day he's, heading back home. This is like months later. And he sees these girls coming out of the neighborhood, like his apartment complex. And they call him. They say, hey, come over here. Like, this is like, I would imagine this is like a place where, everybody knows everybody type of thing. Mm-hmm. So they call him over, and they ask him if he wants to play with the Ouija board. When instantly he's like, nah, I'm cool off of that. They've had their experience. He's obviously been through it. He's like, I'm not doing this. And they're like, no, come on. Like, it's real. Like, that we're actually talking to a spirit. And then he says, you know what? I felt the urge to ask them, who is the spirit that you guys are talking to, right? And he goes on to say, like, you would never guess who it is.
It's Frank.
It's Frank, exactly. And at that moment, he was like, you know what? No, you guys should not play with it. And that's basically his story, to go on to say all that. So it's weird. I don't know if you would like the whole incident with like Frank knowing all these details, saying that he was supposedly murdered, giving them legit phone numbers, asking to call his family, predicting who would be walking into the room, and then, as a result of all this stuff, things start happening to the people in the group. What do you think about that? Do you think there's some sort of coincidence?
I definitely don't think it's some sort of coincidence. I think definitely I feel like something about the Ouija board just brings bad vibes to people that use it. And so maybe they didn't close it right. Maybe Frank was upset that he was murdered, and just like that negative energy stuck with them when they left and after they finished talking with Frank. And you know what people say, like, negative energy will attract more negative energy, and possibly that's why something happened to them. And I don't know what these newsworthy things were happening to them was, but
yeah, we can only
he makes
imagine.
it seem like it's like a really bad stuff, obviously. And I that's my kind of like idea of what happened and like what's going on. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, like, I think you mentioned that they probably didn't say bye correctly, right? And that very well may be the case, right? Because you're just thinking here, these are probably like young kids, so they may not know that you have to say goodbye a certain way and close it up before leaving, or else you're leaving this door open, which we could assume is what happened, since Frank kind of like transferred from them to these girls. And I think the probably the scariest part, at least if I were this person, right? He said they came out of his apartment complex. So they were at a friend's house before, or a friend's apartment before, but now they're at his, and they were playing this.
I feel like Frank is probably trying to get him.
Complex. And yeah, he didn't say anything about that, but now I'm thinking about it like, I wonder if anything happened to him after this, But I don't know. I mean, the Bronx is a rough area, so I mean, we could say that like this could have just been a result of where they're at, but I don't know. I wouldn't want to like say that, I guess like stereotype it.
Yeah.
Where, you're in a bad area, bad thing's going to happen to you, because that's not always the case. I think it's very strange how he says like shortly after this incident, or, speaking with Frank, things start happening to the people in the neighborhood.
Definitely a really cool story to end it off with. Give you guys some food for thoughts. Let us know what you guys think about it.
Oh yeah. And again, this is user Kingsbridge_rich.
And with that is today's episode. I hope you guys really enjoyed the cases we brought to you guys today. Because we'd like to see the photos we share on our Instagram at calaveriapod. Feel free to follow us there. We're going to be posting, how the bridge looks like, that funny cover.
Oh, yeah.
That amazing cover. And yeah, feel free to follow us. Also on our TikTok, I feel like we're blowing up. I see those views. I see the comments.
We definitely have more followers on TikTok than we do on Instagram. So, try to help us even that out.
Definitely, yes. And if you guys have any stories or any like articles you guys see of anything supernatural you guys would like us to talk about, feel free to send that in at our email, calaveriapod@gmail.com.
And as always, everybody, if you want to support the show, feel free to leave a rating or review on whatever podcasting app that you're listening on. And if for whatever reason you're listening on an app that doesn't let you leave a review, be sure to email us, comment on our Instagram or our TikTok, anything, any feedback always helps us. And if you guys know anybody that is interested in the genre, be sure to share it with your friends or family. We want to spread this show to everybody that's interested. And with that, I just want to say thank you all again for joining us, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
Bye.